raise a glass! Now is the time to celebrate another base 10 milestone. This is orange juice, by the way. Appropriate libations for the occasion. I'm excited to answer another round of questions, so I'll be jumping right in with one from Pominic. When/how did you get into Magic and YuGiOh? I actually did not start playing Magic until a few years ago when MTG Arena came out. I was familiar with the game sometime before, but I was not yet ready to purchase the product. Since then, I have been playing Arena on and off as a free-to-play account. In high school, someone tried to introduce me to Magic, but I was weirded out by the concepts like mana. Although, eventually, I saw that there is a lot of merit in exposure to different games, to be able to learn and compare. Right now, I am looking at Vanguard as the next game to learn, but there is a sizable information barrier to entry. As for Yu-Gi-Oh!, I remember buying Legend of Blue Eyes boosters at the store. So I have been a fan since the beginning of the TCG. I played with an isolated group, unaware of ban lists after GOAT, but eventually I did start playing with Synchro Monsters. But then took a break until midway through Zexal, where I started playing on DevPro. I do enjoy older formats like Bujin Geargia, and Clownblade was a personal favorite during ArcV. I skipped the Link era mainly because of Master Rule 4, but I am looking forward to sanctioned play in person soon. Ayman Bakir asks, what is your favorite archetype? My favorite decks of all time are like Diamond Dude Turbo, Plant Synchro, or Chaos Satellar Knights. Ones which use some archetype pieces, but are not a pure archetype deck. I think most people have a soft spot for heroes or Blackwings, and I do fall into that category. But I am not sure if an archetype has checked quite all my boxes for being fun, engaging for both players, and personally expressive. But I am always on the lookout for interesting design. Daniel Wapner questions, for some time I've tried to build a Yu-Gi-Oh! Cube format, but the game just doesn't present itself well for limited. How would you go about drafting Yu-Gi-Oh? As far as officially supported products, the Battle Pack series are intended for drafting, but I think this is a broader question. There are a few principles in Yu-Gi-Oh's design which limit player expression and make drafting harder. Archetypes are the obvious one, as a lot of the support is parasitic, relegated to its own archetype. Another problem is the ability to play any card in any deck, whereas a game like Magic is restricted by the color or colors of mana your land base can produce. On top of that, so many Yu-Gi-Oh cards can be incredibly narrow and less suited for general play. One strategy could be to have a few decks in mind when designing the cube, then sprinkling a few generic power cards on top of a good shell. Or, if you're interested in making a GOAT-like format, you can fill the pool with good generic cards. Either way, there is a lot of legwork, but I really like the idea of Yu-Gi-Oh! Cubes. Arc Umbra inquires, with the recent Yu-Gi-Oh! Ban list leaving only Malicious in the semi-limited category, do you think it's time for the semi-limited list to go? Do you see some sort of alternative to it, or the whole ban list system in general? Malicious is a little special, as the card bounces around the list a lot, whenever it happens to break a new summoning method. But the broader question is much more interesting. I remember when the hands were called to be semi-limited, and I think there is merit to the semi-limited list, but there's probably a more elegant solution. The relative simplicity of the current forbidden, limited, and semi-limited statuses is that it is easy to explain how many copies of the card can be in a deck. This is a problem for the extra deck though, because running multiple copies of a power card does not increase consistency like it does in the main deck. So, as a result, extra deck monsters often get forbidden or remain unlimited. If you're willing to add complexity to the ban list, then Duel Links has a different take, where your deck can contain only one copy of a card on the limited list, and no other limited cards. This also applies to semi-limits, where a total of 2 copies of semi-limited cards can be in the deck, and then no other cards from the semi-limited list. This could be 2 of the same card or 2 different cards from my understanding. Pokemon had something similar with partner bans. When there are 2 cards that produce a problematic combo together, you can still play either card, but not both in the same deck. So, purely hypothetically, you could run either Substitute or Mass Driver, but not both. I think this is a more elegant solution than unbanning one dragon ruler at a time to prevent the rise of another dedicated dragon ruler deck. This topic really deserves its own video, in which I might also pose the question, why do we ban cards in general? Kyle Yoder asks, think you'll ever talk about keywords and their effect on design space? Blanket 1/turn negation and piercing damage have similar word count on the card, but one has vastly more power per word. But it'd be a lot easier to include weaker/conditional effects if they were properly keyworded. This topic has been on my mind for quite some time, and even found its way onto the beginning of the year's brainstorming list. Konami has a weird aversion to keywords, but I think I am starting to understand why. Without set rotation, the game does not have clear breaking points to standardize language on cards. Sometimes cards get problem-solving text, or even effect-changing errata, but the introduction of keywords would have to be on a huge scale. It would be nice to standardize some things as well, like sending from hand and discarding from hand, and I think Mystic Tomato and other battle floaters getting their effects upon destruction by cards in general, not just by battle, would be cool. But there is just such a wide variety of effects in the game. It took forever to get piercing battle damage onto the cards, and that is an evergreen mechanic. For other less frequently used mechanics, like with the Madolche shuffle effect for example, the cards would probably still need to have reminder text, somewhat defeating the purpose of the bolded keyword. I'm not sure it is fair to call it power creep or even a lack of general foresight, but I think the real problem is agglutinative design. It seems like archetypes get their own little gimmick, which, outside of serendipitous synergy, silos cards to particular decks. The design space of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a bit of a mess, since there is not a deck building restriction like class in Hearthstone, or even a softer one like in Magic as I mentioned before. This means any card can still go into any deck. In the early days, this led to homogeneous decks built out of a handful of power cards. But then archetypes shifted the design direction to more closed design space, where decks are dominated by archetype support, and maybe a few power or tech cards. I love the idea of keywords, but with a paper game, the logistics are daunting. Maybe moving towards keywords in the future, but then old cards will be confusing to new players. Another topic worthy of a much deeper exploration, maybe even as a What If Wednesday. Pattern has a question, and I recognize that name from the last Base 10 milestone video. Am I sensing a pattern? What other TCG and game design channels would you recommend? This is such a hard question to answer, or rather, being brief but thorough in my explanations. For Magic, I like Nizahone and the Mana Leak. For Yu-Gi-Oh, a little Mono Bluetron, a little Mega Capital G, but I'm not very heavy into Yu-Gi-Oh content. Mainly because I do not want to plagiarize or cross-contaminate. I am open to cross-pollination, but that is more for crossover episodes. Game Maker's Toolkit is more general game design, and highly commendable. I have only seen one video from Patrician TV, but it was several hours long, and pretty enjoyable the whole way through, in the most intense Morrowind breakdown possible. Spirit of the Law is math-heavy analysis on the AoE series, and this interview with Edmund McMillan is great, and sort of talks about game design every now and again, but is more insightful on his creative process and personal struggles. This GDC lecture from Mark Rosewater is great too. Make Gristlebrand 7 mana already. The superfan Alexander McKay, who has been absolutely lovely in commenting on every video, has a couple questions. Can we hear more about you personally? If it must correlate to trading cards or Yu-Gi-Oh, that's fine too. What is your favorite TCG? Which was your first? Do you play competitively? Etc. You can always ask a question, but of course I may not answer it. This is another difficult question due to how broad it is. I am in my 20s, 5'11", pretty fit. I am a strong proponent for education, and I think that personal improvement is universal. I have a couple dogs and help my family raise hobby chickens and quail, and at this point I do not know what else to say. So, moving back to my forte. Yu-Gi-Oh is a special interest and probably one of my biggest inspirations and influences, but I think there is merit in most card games that are not out to steal money from children. I remember getting a mysterious fossil card in Pokemon as a kid, and Kabuto is still my favorite fossil Pokemon. I will always choose Dome over Helix. I don't think I ever actually played a complete game of the Pokemon TCG, but I am definitely open to the idea. I play ranked mode in some games, but in paper it is expensive. As far as Yu-Gi-Oh, I plan on bringing a heavy anti-meta deck into an event one day. Finally, Warzone Entertainment requests some advice. I know your channel is still fairly new, but regardless, I want to ask if you have any advice on making videos. How do you come up with topics, and how long do you work on a script? I feel like asking someone whose channel growth is still new, because it makes me feel like I can do it too. Of course you can do it. And I am using the collective you to extend beyond just Warzone Entertainment. It is important to remember just how much you can bring to the table, with your own set of unique experiences and personal traits. I guarantee that there is an audience for your content, but it might take a while for them to find your content. Hopefully in future community spotlight videos, I can offer more words of encouragement and advice. But back to the question at hand. Coming up with ideas is a mixed bag. Sometimes it is very easy to brainstorm several ideas in one sitting, other times there is the occasional writer's block. In high school I would write a few thousand words a week, and video essays seemed like a natural evolution. As far as specifics on coming up with topics, some videos are part of a series, and it is not too creatively taxing to cover another chapter in the history of the ban list, for example. A lot of videos come from a card game design question I have that I think is worth exploring, with a recent example being how far are you willing to go for card advantage, inspiring the videos on the Pot and Treasure Card series. As far as advice for having ideas, try to write down whatever comes to mind, so that you can return to it later. Some ideas take quite a while before I return to them, but good record keeping helps to retain details. Scripts take a variable amount of time. Obviously, longer scripts take a longer time to create. I would say each page takes an hour to 90 minutes on average, and I write in single-space 11-point Arial font for reference. This estimate does not include research time, which can be quite a process, with hours going into just researching for the yearly competitive overviews. It might sound intimidating at first, but you divide large tasks into smaller tasks and keep subdividing until it is manageable. Don't worry about the end result, because you will always be your own worst critic. It has been an absolute joy to see all the support as the channel has grown, and I have so many plans for the future. Thank you for every like, every comment, every share, and every time you sent a video link to your grandma on a handwritten letter. I try not to make too many calls to action, mostly because I think it degrades the viewing experience. So it is always wonderful to see the engagement. It is an honor to have such a brilliant and respectful audience. And to add to the reply to Warzone Entertainment, the audience has always been an inspiration for content. Not just the ideas and video requests, but their overwhelming support, and I cannot in words express how thankful I am each day. Thank you for the continued support, and I am excited to be able to keep producing quality content in the future.